"Excuse me, this section isn't for coach passengers." That was the first thing Clara heard as she looked up. No smile, no greeting, just accusation. The flight attendant, tall, polished, and visibly annoyed, stood over her with her arms crossed, eyes already scanning Clara like she was a security risk. Clara blinked. She hadn't even taken off her headphones yet. "Sorry?" she asked. The woman didn't answer the question. Instead, she stepped in closer, her voice low but cold. "You need to move. First class is for confirmed ticket holders only." Clara reached into her hoodie pocket and calmly pulled out her boarding pass. "It's 1A, she said, holding it up. The woman snatched it like she'd been waiting to catch a thief. She glanced at it once, barely a second, then narrowed her eyes. "This looks printed," she said. "Because it is," Clara replied, already feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "I checked in online, like it says to." "Mm-hmm," the flight attendant said, clearly unimpressed. "And where are your parents?" There it is. That line again. That question that didn't sound like concern, more like suspicion. Clara exhaled. "I'm traveling alone. I'm 15. It's not my first flight." The woman gave a tight smile, but the damage was already done. She turned toward the intercom and said without hesitation, "Can I get security up front? We have an unaccompanied minor in first class with an unverified boarding pass." And just like that, Clara Bennett, age 15, with a valid ticket in her hand, was being removed from first class in front of a full cabin of strangers. If this happened to your child, what would you do? Tell us where you're watching from. This one's going to hit hard. The entire cabin seemed to freeze. The murmurs started like static. A middle-aged couple across the aisle exchanged glances. A man in 2D took out his phone, not to film, not yet, just in case. Clara sat perfectly still, refusing to shrink even an inch. But inside, her chest burned. This wasn't the first time someone looked at her. Brown skin, oversized hoodie, sneakers, and decided she didn't fit where she was. But it never stopped hurting. It never stopped being humiliating. She straightened her shoulders and stared ahead. The leather seat smelled like citrus cleaner. She held on to the armrest like it might anchor her to dignity. Within seconds, 2 security staff in gray airport polos entered from the front cabin. One looked young, almost nervous. The other moved with the weariness of someone who'd seen this too many times. "She's not listed in our gate manifest," the flight attendant declared, handing over Clara's pass. "It looks like a fake." The older officer squinted at it, then at Clara. "This says 1A. She's in 1A. "I've already contacted the front desk," the attendant insisted. "There's a chance she snuck up here during general boarding." That was it. Clara stood up, slowly, calmly, but her voice shook just a little. "I didn't sneak anywhere," she said. "I was seated by the gate attendant. I scanned my boarding pass. I followed every rule. The only thing I did wrong was sit in a seat some people don't think I deserve." The younger officer looked uncomfortable. The older one hesitated, but the flight attendant was already waving toward the back. "Just move her while we sort this out, miss," the younger guard said gently. "Why don't we step to the back while we get this cleared up?" Clara's fingers curled into her palm. This wasn't about security. This was about appearance, prejudice, control. And she was done playing nice. "I'll go," she said, grabbing her backpack. "But you're making a mistake." "Rhonda," the attendant smiled again. "It's not personal. It's never personal, until the whole system falls apart." Clara walked down the narrow aisle like it was a tunnel of shame. Passengers craned their necks. Some whispered. A few frowned. But none said a word. She reached row 34, middle seat. crammed between a man already snoring and a teenage boy who smelled like energy drinks. She sat, swallowed the lump in her throat, and reached slowly into her backpack. From a hidden pocket, she pulled out a sleek, matte black device, no bigger than a phone. Fingerprint locked. Military-grade encrypted. She tapped the screen. Access granted. Fail-safe protocol. Tier 5. Her mother had built it. Helena Sinclair. Engineer. Whistleblower. And the reason Clara now carried this responsibility. Before she died in a still controversial crash 3 years ago, Helena had coded one final back door into the system she helped design. Airgate lock. It powered coordination between federal airports, ensuring gate access complied with ethics codes, behavior audits, and minor protection protocols. Clara didn't have full control, but she had something just as powerful: the authority to flag an airline for ethics breach. And when a verified Tier 5 account flagged a flight, gates froze. Contracts paused. FAA audits triggered. Clara stared down at the screen. Her pulse was steady now. Ethics violation code. Passenger discrimination. Minor. Flight. Sky Nova 761. Gate. Sea Oak. Date. June 5th. Action. Trigger failsafe. She tapped once. No dramatic alarms. No flashing lights. Just a silent cascade of systems syncing behind the scenes. Elsewhere, at Oakland International, a red light blinked in the operations center. Then San Diego. Then LAX. One by one, terminals connected to the airgate lock flagged the same flight. Within 4 minutes, 3 airports suspended inbound authorization from Sky Nova. 2 international hubs rejected their incoming landing requests. FAA's ethics division received a silent ping tagged Clara Bennett failsafe. And Sky Nova's internal dashboard showed one blinking message. Flight 761. Ethics breach confirmed. Lockdown initiated. Back in row 34C, Clara put the device away. She didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She just sat back, hands folded on her lap. For the first time in 20 minutes, she could finally breathe. She'd been taught. Real power doesn't raise its voice. It changes the room. Silently. Permanently. The first sign that something was wrong came not in the air, but on the ground. 75 miles south, at the Gate Authority Control Center in San Jose, a single amber alert blinked on a terminal labeled Gate Lock. Sky 761. Anomaly triggered. Most gate alerts were routine. Last-minute maintenance, gate changes, weather diversions. But this one was different. It came coded as failsafe protocol, Tier 5 verified source. Within 20 seconds, a red light flared on 3 other terminals. The supervisor, a man named Rafael Cruz, with 23 years in airport logistics, leaned in. He recognized the name attached to the Tier 5 signature. Clara Bennett. He sat up straighter. That name hadn't appeared in their system in years. Not since her mother, Helena Sinclair, had been confirmed dead in the Seattle crash that still stirred whispers in FAA circles. Raphael knew what this meant. Put a hold on all inbound gates linked to Sky Nova Flight 761, he said, without waiting for the system to process. Notify Oakland, San Diego, and LAX. Execute gate lock freeze under Section B14. The room went silent. Then came the real echo. The flight was airborne now, but just barely. The seatbelt sign was still lit. Clara sat quietly in row 34C, pretending to scroll through music on her phone. The little device was back in her bag. Dark. Silent. But it had already done its job. 3 rows ahead, Rhonda, the flight attendant, strode up and down the aisle, still wearing the face of someone who thought she'd done the right thing. Still smug. Still untouched. Clara didn't make a scene. That wasn't the point. She just waited. It started with the pilot's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Flores. We've been asked to maintain current altitude while we wait for clearance confirmation from Oakland. Should be brief. We'll keep you updated." That was odd. Oakland didn't delay clearance this early in the flight. Clara glanced out the window, hiding the small smirk that tugged at the corner of her mouth. A young controller named Devin tapped nervously at his headset. "I've never seen this before," he muttered. "Skynova 761 is locked out of all gates. Every landing authorization is reading red." "Gate lock has never failed," his supervisor snapped. "Pull backup access from FAA." "No good. FAA just confirmed a Level 2 ethics protocol triggered from a Tier 5 device. We're under blackout until the ethics inquiry clears." "Who the hell has Tier 5 access?" Devin paused, then read the name aloud from the override log. Clara Bennett. Ram Rhonda was mid-pour, refilling a passenger's sparkling water in first class, when the intercom buzzed again. "Flight crew, please report to cockpit immediately." Her brow furrowed. It wasn't the usual code. It wasn't turbulence. Wasn't cabin issue. The tone was different. Urgent. Clipped. She handed the bottle to another attendant and moved quickly. Inside the cockpit, Captain Flores didn't look up from the screen. "We've got a problem," he said. "Mechanical?" "No, political." He turned the tablet so she could see. "Skynova 761. Ethics flagged. Gate access frozen. Federal review pending." Rhonda blinked. "What? What does that mean?" "It means we don't land unless the ethics division clears it. Right now, we've got no wait." Her voice thinned. Is this about that girl?" Flores didn't answer. He didn't need to. By now, 4 airports had joined the freeze. Chicago and Denver had received delayed cooperation notices. Toronto refused to accept the inbound swap flight scheduled for next gate slot. Passengers arriving from different Skynova flights were being told their layovers were on hold due to network congestion. But inside industry channels, the word was spreading fast. Someone triggered the Clara Bennett failsafe, and if that name came up, you paused everything. Because her mother's death still cast a long shadow, one filled with black box recordings, whistleblower reports, and unacknowledged ethics violations buried by Skynova. The same airline this girl had just been humiliated on. The captain returned to the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently experiencing a delay in landing clearance. We ask for your patience." In economy, passengers stirred. A few groaned. One man swore under his breath. In first class, a businessman pulled down his headphones. "This can't be weather. What's going on?" Rhonda was pale now. She was tapping into the crew communication tablet. Message after message from the Skynova control center scrolled across the screen. "Do not engage with passenger Bennett. Internal review initiated. Federal inquiry in motion. Ethics lockdown triggered. She suddenly felt cold. Very cold. A red banner blinked across the top of the secure dashboard. Tier 5 activation. Fail-safe protocol authorized by Clara Bennett. Classification. Minor protection violation. Immediate evaluation required. An ethics officer named Sonia Chin pulled her glasses down her nose and said quietly, Someone's in trouble. She hadn't moved. She hadn't said a word. And yet, she had grounded the system. That was the power of being underestimated, the power of silence, the power her mother had taught her. Not with revenge, not with shouting, but with infrastructure, with tools no one saw coming. She closed her eyes. She didn't want an apology from Rhonda. She didn't even need her to be embarrassed. She wanted the system that protected people like Rhonda to tremble. And it was trembling. Rhonda sat in the jump seat, gripping her armrest. A message popped up on her tablet. Crew member identified in ethics report, internal status, under review. Effective immediately. Suspended from duty pending investigation. She read it 3 times before it sank in. Suspended. Not might be. Not considered. Just done. Rhonda slowly lifted her eyes and looked toward the back of the plane. She couldn't see Clara, but she didn't need to. She finally understood who she had thrown out. The plane remained in a holding pattern, circling like a quiet storm, with nowhere to land. Inside, Clara took out her headphones and scrolled through her notes for the speech she was supposed to give tomorrow. It began. Ethics is not about rules. It's about what you do when no one thinks you matter. She smiled. She was ready. Back in Berkeley, a landline rang in a sunlit kitchen. Charlotte Bennett hadn't touched that phone in months, because it only rang for one reason. She turned off the stove, wiped her hand on a checkered dish towel, and picked it up. Charlotte speaking. There was a pause, then a voice. Steady. Clipped. Female. Mrs. Bennett. This is FAA Ethics Oversight. Division 9. Charlotte's heart didn't skip. It dropped. She didn't ask what this was about. If that line was ringing, something had triggered it. And there was only one person alive, who still held Tier 5 emergency access under her late daughter's name. Where is Clara? Charlotte asked quietly. Sky Nova Flight 761, Oakland bound. Triggered a Level 2 ethics lockdown. Gate freeze initiated. 5 airports non-compliant. No injuries. A slow exhale. Good. Ma'am, are you available for a federal ethics coordination call within the next 20 minutes? Charlotte leaned back against the kitchen counter. She hadn't been on a government call in 5 years. They had stopped asking after she declined to sit on the National Ethics Charter Committee. But now, yes, she said, send me the secure channel. I'll be ready. Meanwhile, on Flight 761, the air had shifted. Passengers in first class were visibly agitated. A woman in pearls tapped her tray table like a nervous metronome. A businessman pulled out his phone to check for Wi-Fi. No signal. Someone whispered about a bomb threat. Others thought it was just tech issues. Only one person on board understood the full scale of what was unfolding. Clara. She hadn't moved from her seat. She didn't gloat. Her hands were still in her lap, her face unreadable, but deep down her chest felt heavy, not with regret, but with gravity. This wasn't just personal now. The whole machine had been stirred, and she knew what came next. Back in Berkeley, Charlotte joined the video call from her secure tablet. 7 faces appeared. FAA oversight officers, 2 from international ethics committees, 1 from the European Civil Aviation Board, and 1 man she didn't recognize until he spoke. Miss Bennett, he said, voice like gravel. I'm David Lind, Interim Director of the U.S. Aviation Ethics Office. I'm stepping in due to the emergency classification. Charlotte nodded once. What's the damage? We have 5 airports under Tier 5 gate lock. Oakland, San Diego, Seattle Tacoma, Toronto Pearson, and London Heathrow. She blinked. International? He nodded. The override system activated on global scope. We didn't even know that protocol still had range after Sinclair's revision. It does, Charlotte said. It's built into the failsafe Clara inherited. The question is, what did Skynova do? A second voice joined in. A woman from the International Charter Council. Flight attendant forcibly removed the child from her assigned seat in first class. No documentation request, no verification, just assumption, and public dismissal. Another face. A man from ICAO added, Clara never declared who she was, never threatened. The trigger was silent. Charlotte's jaw clenched. Of course it was. The silence in the room spoke louder than the words. Finally, someone asked, would you be willing to engage your authority as co-drafter of the Bennett Protocol? Charlotte closed her eyes for half a second. Then, yes, but only if we investigate not just the crew, but the culture that enabled this. In the cockpit of Flight 761, Captain Flores sat pale and still. He'd flown 2 Gulf War tours. Nothing had shaken him like this. He turned to Rhonda. I need to know exactly what you said to her. Rhonda looked offensive. I didn't do anything wrong. She didn't look like a first-class passenger. She was by herself. I thought maybe she was confused. You paged security before even checking her ticket. She didn't act like she belonged. That's the point, he said. You assumed. Rhonda flushed. So now I'm a racist? The pilot didn't answer. But the silence was damning. Back on the ground, the ripple effects had already reached the press. Anonymous sources began leaking fragments. Skynova first-class incident involving minor. Tier 5 lockdown triggered by ethics failsafe. Internal FAA systems frozen pending investigation. By the time the plane was cleared to land, redirected to a private gate in Sacramento, 2 hashtags were trending. She belonged in 1A hash. Bennett failsafe. Clara's name wasn't even in the news yet, but the reaction had begun. At Sacramento Airport, a private car was already waiting on the tarmac. No cameras, no press, just one woman standing with her arms folded. Charlotte Bennett. The moment Clara stepped off the plane, their eyes met. No hugs, no dramatic tears, just recognition. Hi, Clara said softly. You okay? Charlotte asked. Clara nodded. Charlotte tilted her head. You triggered it. Clara looked away. I didn't mean to escalate, but you didn't stop it. No. A pause. Then Charlotte smiled. Not warm, but proud. Good. Inside the terminal, a small conference room had been prepared. 2 FAA agents, an internal compliance officer from Skynova, and a civil rights liaison were waiting. They weren't expecting a teenager to walk in with such calm. Clara sat at the table. The compliance officer cleared his throat. Miss Bennett, we'd like to ask you a few questions. No, Charlotte interrupted. She'll listen, and you'll explain. But Charlotte pulled out a laminated badge from her purse. FAA Ethics Oversight Authority, Tier 5 legacy holder name. Charlotte Sinclair Bennett. The room fell still. The man shifted uncomfortably. We didn't realize. You didn't care, Charlotte said, until you saw fallout. Then Clara leaned forward. I don't want apologies. I want your internal training protocols. I want your evaluation data on first-class service assignments. I want proof that what happened to me doesn't happen to kids who can't trigger a failsafe. Everyone in the room went quiet. She added, because if you don't fix it, I will. Back at Skynova HQ, CEO Alan Rice sat staring at his tablet. Legal was already in panic mode. 4 investment partners had requested ethics audits. 2 booking platforms suspended Skynova's ad priority. And now, the Bennett family had stepped in. Rice sighed. He tapped his comm. "Tell the board we're calling an emergency session. And start drafting a public apology. I want her name on it." Clara Bennett? No, Charlotte. Then he leaned back and whispered under his breath, "God help us if the girl ever speaks." The Skynova executive boardroom wasn't built for apologies, it was built for power. 12 high-back leather chairs, panoramic skyline view, a 10-foot glass table that reflected the ego of every man who had ever sat at it. This morning, it felt like a courtroom. At the far end, Charlotte Bennett sat with her back straight, and her eyes sharper than any contract ever signed in that room. Beside her, Clara didn't say a word. She didn't need to, because today wasn't about revenge. It was about reckoning. Alan Rice, CEO of Skynova, walked in late. Not out of disrespect, out of hesitation. He had built this empire, carved it from 3 bankrupt regional airlines, and turned it into a luxury first titan. But now, one mistake by a flight attendant had activated a fail-safe code no one even remembered existed. And now, the girl whose mother co-wrote the very code was sitting at his table. "Good morning," he offered stiffly. Charlotte didn't stand. "Is it?" The FAA representative cleared his throat. "We'll begin with internal review findings." The passenger, Clara Bennett, was removed from her first-class seat without cause or verification. No ID check, no protocol followed. Just an assumption based on appearance. One board member interrupted. "We don't train our crews to be racist." Charlotte raised a hand. "Don't." The room froze. She stood, walked slowly to the end of the table, and placed a slim binder in front of them. "This is your real training manual, the unwritten one. You don't say it out loud, but you reward it. You promote the ones who spot trouble early. You call it intuition. We call it profiling." No one spoke. She continued. "Your booking algorithm flags high-risk passengers by zip code. You randomly downgrade bookings when there's a system glitch. But we've run the data. Those glitches affect Black and Latino names 61% more often." A board member flinched. It's real," Clara said quietly. "You just never thought one of the girls you downgraded would be your regulator's granddaughter." Alan Rice looked directly at Clara. "You're not just a regulator's granddaughter. You're your mother's daughter." Clara didn't blink. "Yes," she said, "and I remember everything." That silenced him, because years ago, Clara's mother, Dr. Helena Sinclair, had died mid-flight. When a crew ignored her medical bracelet, thinking she was exaggerating, they let her collapse quietly. And the airline? Skynova. It had taken 5 years, 2 Senate hearings, and a federal lawsuit to build the fail-safe index, a system where certain legacy ethics holders, those who lost loved ones due to airline negligence, could silently trigger ethics lockdowns if they sensed injustice mid-flight. Charlotte helped design it, and Clara had just used it. The FAA official turned to Alan. "Mr. Rice, the question now is not just how you'll apologize, it's how you'll prove this will never happen again." Alan took a deep breath. "I want to speak plainly." He turned to Clara. "You could have ruined us. That code locked down 5 airports, froze nearly 2,50 million in operations in less than 7 minutes. If you'd said your name aloud, press would have eaten us alive." Clara shrugged. I didn't need to. The system spoke for me. He nodded. And that's why I want to offer you something. Clara raised an eyebrow. You don't owe me anything, she said. You owe every kid like me something. I know, Alan said, which is why I'm not just apologizing, I'm proposing reform. An hour later, Sky Nova's public livestream began. A sleek conference room, press badges flashing, microphones poised. Alan Rice stepped up to the podium. No teleprompter, no peepoir fluff. He cleared his throat. 5 days ago, our airline failed a young girl named Clara Bennett. She was profiled, humiliated, and removed from her seat. First class, fully paid, legally booked, simply because someone didn't think she looked like she belonged. He paused. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand compensation. Instead, she triggered an ethics protocol that exposed our blind spots. At every level. He looked into the cameras. This isn't just an apology. It's an overhaul. Behind him, the screens lit up. Sky Nova Reform Package. 1.0 Mandatory Ethics Evaluation for Cabin Crew. Passenger Fairness Audit System. PFAS. AI Audit of Booking Biases. 24-hour Incident Review by External Ethics Council. Launching the Clara Bennett Fellowship. A program that funds future leaders in ethics and aviation reform. Starting with 5 Adlon M. The room gasped. But Clara? She stayed in the wings, watching. Silent. Still. Powerful. That night, Charlotte and Clara sat at a small rooftop cafe in Berkeley. No suits, no cameras, just grandmother and granddaughter, watching the sun set behind the city that raised them. Did you expect them to give you that much? Charlotte asked. Clara shook her head. I didn't want anything. I just didn't want them to get away with it. Charlotte sipped her tea. They won't. There was a long silence. Then Clara asked, Do you think Mom would have been proud? Charlotte looked out at the skyline. She would have told you to do it again. Clara never planned to be a symbol. She didn't wake up thinking she'd be on news tickers, or trending across platforms she barely used. She didn't ask for interviews, didn't post any videos, and never once shared a single word on her own account. But 3 days after the Sky Nova broadcast, her name was everywhere. Not because she spoke, but because she hadn't. And somehow, silence became the loudest voice in the room. At 7:12 a.m., Clara opened her school-issued Chromebook to check her biology assignment. Instead, the homepage flashed a headline she hadn't expected to see. The 15-year-old who froze Tua was with a button. Meet Clara Bennett. Next to it was her picture from the airport surveillance footage. Blurred, gray-toned, but unmistakable. She closed the tab. Downstairs, Charlotte was brewing coffee and reading the Times. Clara didn't have to ask. Her grandmother folded the paper and slid it across the table. The front page read, Flight Ethics Revolution. FAA confirms emergency meeting with teen who triggered national audit. Charlotte tapped the rim of her mug. Looks like they want to talk. Clara nodded. I figured. They're asking you to testify. It wasn't a courtroom. Not yet. But walking into the hearing chamber in D.C. felt like stepping into a storm in slow motion. Clara wore navy slacks and a soft gray cardigan. Her mother's. No makeup, no hair done by some PR team. Just herself. And a manila folder held tight in both hands. Reporters leaned across velvet ropes. She's the one. Looks just like her mother. I thought she was older. She's a kid. Charlotte walked behind her, silent, not guiding. not shielding. Just there. Inside the chamber, rows of senators, FAA officials, and aviation lobbyists waited behind microphones. Senator Martin, chair of the Aviation Ethics Subcommittee, welcomed her with a firm nod. "Miss Bennett, we thank you for being here. Please, whenever you're ready." Clara didn't sit yet. She opened the folder and pulled out a page. Handwritten. A diagram. Her own drawing of the flight cabin with a red X marked 1A. Then she looked up. "I didn't come here to talk about a seat," she said. "This was never about a seat. It's about a system that doesn't ask who you are, just what you look like." Murmurs rippled through the room. She continued, voice steady. "I was kicked out because someone assumed I didn't belong. But what you need to understand is, there are thousands of kids like me who won't ever be in first class, who won't ever have a fail-safe code to press, and they're the ones this is really about." Senator Martin leaned forward. "Clara, are you saying the system itself encourages profiling?" Clara didn't flinch. "I'm saying your system isn't broken. It was built this way." That silence again. Heavy. Real. She handed over the second page, a printout of booking algorithm test results, run by Charlotte's team, showing bias linked to names, zip codes, and ticket upgrades. Then a third page, a proposal, not from Skynova, from Clara. The Passenger Protection Protocol, PPP, anonymous reporting for cabin discrimination, mandatory crew ethics certification, emergency access for all passengers to flag behavior, quarterly transparency reports from all major airlines, youth advisory board with voting rights, age 13 to 18. Senator Martin blinked. "You drafted a full policy framework?" Clara just nodded. Charlotte watched from the gallery, her hands folded, expression unreadable. But inside, she was shaking. Not because Clara was strong, but because she wasn't alone. By noon, Clara was already being called the ethics architect. By 6 p.m., the hearing replay had over 2.3 million views. But by midnight, that's when the first call came from Geneva. The International Civil Aviation Ethics Board was requesting a live Zoom with Clara and Charlotte, proposing the PPP as a new global standard. "It's happening," Charlotte whispered. "It's not enough," Clara whispered back, because she hadn't forgotten Rhonda, or the quiet pain of being shoved, doubted, ignored by someone paid to serve. 2 days later, Clara stood in front of a packed audience at the National Transportation Forum in Atlanta, not as a victim, but as the opening keynote speaker. She walked on stage to polite applause, but it grew louder as they saw she carried no notes. She looked into the audience, airline CEOs, policymakers, advocates, and teen groups flown in from every state. And then she said, "You think I came here to tell you what not to do, but I didn't. I came here to tell you what we're going to build next." Silence. Then she pulled up a slide. Clara's rule. No. One should need power to be treated like a person. The room erupted, and the story of Clara Bennett stopped being a headline and became a movement. Clara's inbox was on fire. Her school counselor emailed her, her science teacher, a girl she hadn't spoken to since 5th grade. Even the owner of her favorite boba tea shop sent a voice note that just said, "Girl, you did that." By the end of the week, her speech had been translated into 6 languages. BBC called her the quiet force. The Washington Post, a teen who reprogrammed the skies. But Clara, she was still brushing her teeth the same way, still doing dishes, still feeding her neighbor's grumpy cat when they were out of town. Fame didn't change her. But power? Power attracted Emma. It started with a leaked memo. Clara wasn't supposed to see it. But when a junior staffer from the FAA forwarded her a thread accidentally, Charlotte knew it wasn't an accident. The subject line read, Containment Strategy. Phase 1. Soft delegitimize the Bennett Plan. Inside were bullet points. Highlight her age. Imply overreach by teen activists. Use parent group concerns. Pilot training disruption. Push narrative. Good story. Bad policy. Clara scrolled through it, her hand still sticky from an orange she'd peeled 5 minutes earlier. She looked up. Are they serious? Charlotte looked over her glasses. Oh, honey, they're terrified. Meanwhile, TV segments had started shifting tone. One popular anchor, smiling just a little too tight, said, A well-intentioned child should not be drafting federal protocol. That's a job for seasoned adults. Another segment on a business network ran a panel of experts, 4 white men in suits, discussing whether youth-led trauma was a reliable basis for regulation. Clara watched it in silence, then muted the TV, then turned to Charlotte. We need a plan. She wasn't wrong. Behind closed doors, 3 airline coalitions, quietly fuming after being forced to sign the Clara Bennett Passenger Ethics Accord, began crafting their counterplay. They couldn't touch her directly. That would backfire. But they could slow the rollout, choke the funding, flood media with doubt, and above all, they could buy time. Until Clara moved on. She was 15. She'd grow out of it. Right? Wrong. On Tuesday, Clara received a letter, hand-delivered. Thick envelope. Gold seal. It wasn't from a school or a government agency. It was from Alonzo Vega, the elusive ethics architect behind Skytrack, the real-time aviation compliance network used by federal airports. Clara had never met him. He was a mystery, even to Charlotte. The letter read, Dear Miss Bennett, you and I have never met, but I've followed your every word since Chapter 1 began. The game they're playing isn't new, but you're not just playing. You're rewriting the rules. If you ever need access, real access, use the enclosed code, AV. Inside was a single black card. No numbers, no name, just a small silver key symbol in the center. Clara stared at it. What does this mean? She asked. Charlotte exhaled. It means someone just passed you the spare keys to the system. That night, Clara activated the code through Charlotte's secure terminal. A new interface appeared. Skytrack Core, a live dashboard of compliance scores, ethics breaches, passenger complaints, and real-time algorithms for 42 airports. She clicked on the data stream for Skynova. A red alert flashed. 42 active complaints flagged. All 3 escalated by crew manipulation of passenger profiles. She leaned forward. These aren't random. Charlotte joined her. They're rerouting ethics pings, trying to make the system think it's functioning. It was a workaround, a cheat, and someone high up was behind it. The next day, Clara published a quiet update. No press, no drama. Just a soft message on the Skytrack Ethics Journal. When systems start hiding themselves, that's when we need transparency the most. We're watching. CB. That was all. But within 12 hours, 3 regional airports initiated internal ethics audits. By morning, the New York Times ran the headline, Teen Whistleblower Exposes Manipulated Ethics Data in Airline Compliance System. By nightfall, Sky Nova stock had dropped 4 per night. The counterstrike had failed, but the war wasn't over. That same evening, a man in a tailored gray suit stood at a downtown DC bar. He scrolled through Clara's quote, then called someone on a secure line. "She's not going away," he muttered. "If anything, she's evolving." The voice on the other end said, "Then we pivot, shift the focus, make her story about something else. Maybe even turn her into a liability." How? There was a pause. Then, find her father. Back in Berkeley, Clara sat quietly under her blanket, laptop open. Notifications buzzing every 2 seconds. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't scared. She was calculating. Because she knew the moment applause starts fading, the real work begins. Clara had always known. There were questions she never asked, holes in stories she never poked at, photos half burned in drawers she never opened. But now the world wanted answers she didn't even want for herself, and they were digging. Hard. On the second Thursday after the ethics memo leak, Clara and Charlotte returned home from a late-night policy roundtable. The moment they stepped into the living room, Charlotte's phone buzzed. Once, twice, then 9 times in a row. She didn't answer. Just tapped into the live news. A split-screen broadcast flickered on the TV. On the left was Clara's speech at the National Transportation Forum. On the right, a man in a faded military photo. Beneath the images, breaking. Sources say, Skytrack teen's father tied to federal investigation. Clara's chest tightened. She didn't need to ask who the man was. She had his eyes. The next morning, media vans parked along their cul-de-sac. Reporters camped outside, holding photos, waving microphones. "Clara, is it true? Was your father part of a tech fraud investigation? Did you build Skytrack with stolen code?" The lies came fast, stitched into half-truths and spliced into segments. And worse, some stuck. By noon, Clara's school suspended her for her safety. By 2 p.m., Skytrack's ethics board called an emergency meeting. By 4:17 p.m., a trending hashtag read, #Clara coded from crime. Charlotte paced the kitchen. "This isn't an attack on you," she said. "It's an attack on your credibility. They're scared." Clara just stared out the window. "They're not wrong," she whispered. "I don't know anything about him." She didn't say his name, not once, but Charlotte finally did. "James," she said. "Your father's name was James Hollister." Clara blinked. "Was?" Charlotte nodded. "He died when you were 6. I never told you because I didn't think you needed to carry his shadow. He wasn't a criminal, but he wasn't clean either." Clara didn't cry. She didn't even move. She just asked, "Did he love me?" Charlotte hesitated. "Then he did, but not the way you deserved." By evening, Clara was trending in 3 countries, for all the wrong reasons. Conservative news outlets ran segments titled "Sky Queen" or "Sky Scam." Anonymous accounts posted supposed leaked code fragments. One journalist claimed she'd plagiarized a 2011 ethics framework authored by, ironically, James Hollister himself. Every headline framed Clara not as a visionary, but as her father's ghost. Inside, Clara sat in silence, scrolling the comments under her ethics speech video. Once filled with praise, they were now littered with doubt. She's just a front. She's playing the sympathy card, another privileged girl playing savior. She closed the laptop, then reached under her bed and pulled out the one thing Charlotte had never touched, A rusted metal box with a broken lock. Inside, a photo, a postcard, and one flash drive. She'd found it years ago, behind the old furnace. Never opened it. Now she plugged it in. The screen loaded slowly. Inside were 3 files. A letter titled, "For Clara when she's ready." A blueprint file. Proto-ethics. AI. A signed document. Joint IP proposal. Hollister/A Bennett. Clara opened the letter. Her father's words were messy, typed, but raw. "You're probably angry, or confused, or both. I don't know who you'll grow up to be, but if you're anything like your mother, you'll have fire. And if you're reading this, you're carrying the fight we started. Don't let the system twist it. Or you." Clara blinked away the sting in her eyes. "We tried to build something real, your mom and I. They killed it before it launched. I took the fall. She took you. That was our deal. The blueprint was a primitive version of Skytrack. Rough, incomplete, but unmistakably the same foundation." Clara closed the file, then turned to Charlotte. "You built it with him." Charlotte didn't deny it. "Yes, we called it proto-ethics, but after the crash in 2010 when the project was silenced, he took the heat. I walked away. You were just a baby. I chose to protect you." Clara didn't respond. She didn't need to. She stood up, grabbed her laptop, and started typing. The post went live 2 hours later. No PR, no headline. Just code. Transparency isn't clean, but it's mine. Here's the original protocol. Judge for yourself. She uploaded all 3 files, left nothing out, and at the bottom signed her name. Not just as Clara Bennett, but as Clara Bennett Hollister, daughter of 2 broken builders. And not ashamed. The internet exploded. Half praised her bravery, half dug deeper into the dirt. But for the first time in 3 days, the noise wasn't spinning the story. It was hers again. 3 days later, the FAA reinstated the Passenger Ethics Index rollout, reaffirming its foundation as originated by the Bennett-Hollister model, the Washington Ethics Consortium named Clara. The 2025 Youth Architect of Systems Change. But more importantly, one senator called Charlotte personally. "We'd like to nominate Clara to co-chair the new Civilian Ethics Oversight Council." Charlotte paused. "She's still 50. The senator replied. "Yes, but the world she's building doesn't care how old she is, only how honest." The air in the Capitol Hill conference room was icy, not because of the AC, though it was blasting, but because Clara could feel it. The stares, the side glances, the hush that fell whenever she walked in. The title on her nameplate read, "Clara Bennett Hollister, Civilian Co-Chair, Aviation Ethics Oversight Council." But respect. That didn't come printed, especially not from 6 men twice her age, each with resumes longer than the runway at LAX. They didn't hate her, at least not publicly. They commended her bravery. They valued her perspective. They even clapped politely when she first spoke. But every time Clara brought up enforcement, real-time score publishing, mandatory ethics API transparency, someone always pushed back. "Let's revisit that next quarter." Or worse, "We appreciate your input, but the complexity of federal procurement might be outside your current scope of experience." Charlotte whispered once, "That's Washington speak for sit down, little girl." But Clara didn't sit. She didn't flinch. She studied. Every protocol, every vendor contract, every ethics scoring loophole buried in page 47 of 84. And that's when she found it. A clause hidden in the vendor agreement of Skynova Airlines, one of the 3 holdouts still resisting full passenger ethics compliance. It read, "Ethics score modifiers may be proposed for review quarterly, contingent on internal variance reviews conducted via in-house compliance tools." Translation: they were grading themselves and using it to cheat the federal system. Clara didn't go to the press. She went to the council, calmly, professionally, presented her data, laid it out in a 6-minute PowerPoint. The room went quiet. Then, Councilman Trent from Illinois cleared his throat. "Ms. Bennett, while your passion is admirable, I question the legality of how this data was acquired." Clara didn't blink. "It's from a federal-facing ethics dashboard. I have level 3 authorization," Councilwoman Levine chimed in. "But if we make this public, we risk destabilizing all 3 of our largest airline partners." Clara didn't raise her voice. She just said, "Passengers are already destabilized. They're duct-taped. Taped. Disrespected. Denied. What you're protecting isn't stability, it's revenue." And with that, she called for a vote. Only 3 members raised their hands. 4 abstained. The motion failed. The room moved on. But Clara didn't. That night, she didn't go home. She and Charlotte went to the Federal Data Access Center, a beige, windowless building that looked more like a DMV than the place where aviation networks were monitored. Inside, she requested a compliance status check on Skynova's last 60 days of activity. It took 4 hours. When it finished, the system returned 17 alerts, deliberate signal deferrals, unreported gate incidents, and 1 major breach. A VIP passenger who was racially profiled, removed from a seat, and falsely flagged as non-cooperative. Clara knew the name. It was a 13-year-old girl, Maya Fletcher. The case had been buried. And that changed everything. The next morning, Clara filed an Emergency Ethics Acceleration Memo, EIEM, a new override protocol she'd authored herself, backed by the FAA charter. It required just 3 signatures to trigger. She had her own. Charlotte's, who had been appointed technical systems advisor, and a surprise 3rd, Alonzo Vega. He showed up quietly. No announcement. Just a nod. "Time to clear the air," he said. At 9:42 a.m., the Skytrack Core dashboard went red. 3 airports received the following alert. Skynova Airlines temporarily suspended from passenger ethics network. Non-compliance level, critical. Flights paused. Boardings halted. Within 12 minutes, a chain reaction followed. 1:47 a.m., in contracts frozen. 3 Skynova executives placed on leave. Senate subcommittee issued emergency subpoenas. And Clara, she sat quietly in the back corner of the Capitol press room. Not at the podium, not on a throne. Just observing. Watching the dominoes fall. At 1:17 p.m., Skynova CEO Lisa Penderson held a press conference. Visibly sweating, she read, "Due to unforeseen compliance discrepancy, Skynova is working closely with federal partners to restore full operational transparency. We acknowledge the breakdown and thank Ms. Bennett Hollister for her diligence." The apology was long. But the sentence Clara noticed most, "We acknowledge, not we deny, not we regret, but we acknowledge." And in D.C., that was the equivalent of blood on the floor. Later that night, Clara received a call from Councilwoman Levine. She didn't say much. Just this: "You've made your point. The next vote will be public." Clara hung up, leaned back on the couch, and finally exhaled. Charlotte handed her a hot cup of cocoa. "You all right?" Clara smiled faintly. "No, but I'm not here to feel all right. I'm here to make it right." Clara didn't say a word when the gates shut down. She didn't need to. At exactly 6:42 a.m., the first domino fell. 3 major airports, Seattle-Tacoma, Denver International, and Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta, received a silent ping through the SkyScan ethics compliance system. The alert was non-negotiable. Ethics Compliance Breach Level 5. Initiate Gate Lock Protocol. Within 90 seconds, all SkyNova flights scheduled to depart were denied gate clearance. No alarm, no flashing headlines, just a digital freeze. By the time airport staff started making confused calls, Clara Bennett was already sitting on the edge of her bed in Berkeley, eyes fixed on her screen, watching the ripple unfold across the country. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, not trembling, not panicking. She was focused, calm, like her mother used to be. Across from her, Grandma Charlotte clutched a warm mug of ginger tea. "It's done, isn't it?" Clara nodded. "They're locked out. What happens now? We wait for them to come to us." By 8:15 a.m., corporate Slack channels at SkyNova looked like war rooms. Department heads fired messages back and forth. "Why are we being denied access at CNATL? Who triggered gate lock? FAA? Is this tied to that girl's access code? We need Weiss on this. Now." Meanwhile, the SkyScan Index, Clara's late mother's crowning creation, showed 3 big red bars. The score for SkyNova's ethics compliance had dropped below 42%, triggering the failsafe protocol. A line of code written years ago had now effectively shut down part of America's air infrastructure. This wasn't a hack. It was accountability by design. And Clara, age 15, held the key. By noon, the press caught wind. The phrase "passenger ethics accord" started trending across social media. Journalists scrambled for background. Most were stunned to find that the entire meltdown could be traced back to a silent ethics trigger, initiated not by a federal agency, but by a teenage girl with verified oversight access. Is this about the incident in first class last week? Sources say she's the daughter of the late Helena Bennett, the airgate lock architect. Did this girl just freeze $500 million in logistics? As the press frothed, Clara got a call. Blocked number. She answered anyway. "This is Clara." "Miss Bennett, this is Director Langston from the FAA. We'd like to discuss a possible closed session review panel." "Immediately." She paused. "I'll bring my documentation." 2 hours later, Clara and Grandma Charlotte sat in a secure briefing room in downtown San Francisco. Across the table sat 6 officials from the FAA, TSA, and the Department of Transportation. Most were stone-faced. One of them, Langston, opened with what almost sounded like admiration. "You realize what you just did? Paralyzed over 2 SkyNova flights and froze logistics at 3 major hubs?" Clara nodded. "You realize that's a national security level disruption?" She raised an eyebrow. "So is duct taping a kid to his seat. So is kicking passengers out of first class for being the wrong skin color. So is ignoring every internal complaint system for years." No one interrupted her. "I didn't build the system. My mom did. But she built it for this, for when no one else would listen." Langston leaned back. "Why now?" Clara's eyes sharpened. "Because it wasn't just my seat they tried to take. It was her dignity, and mine, and every other kid who's ever been told you don't belong here." The room was silent. Then the youngest official on the panel, a woman in her early 30s, broke the stillness. "She's not wrong. That night, the story broke on CNN. Teenage ethics architect freezes airline access after discrimination incident. It went viral in hours. Parents reposted it. Veterans reposted it. Flight crew whistleblowers shared it with captions like, "She did what we've been too scared to do." At 2 a.m., Skynova's CEO released a written statement. While we do not condone what occurred on Flight 378, we believe the response has been disproportionate and dangerous. We are initiating internal investigations. But it was too late. The FAA held an emergency press briefing at 10 a.m. the next morning. They confirmed that the Clara Bennett Protocol would now be part of a national review process for airlines seeking federal contracts. Any carrier scoring below 55% on the Passenger Ethics Index would be subject to automatic review and potential gate denial. Skynova stock dropped 8.2% by market close. But for Clara, the victory wasn't loud. It was quiet. She didn't post a celebratory video, didn't give a TikTok explanation. She just sat in her living room, rereading the final review logs from the suspended flights. Grandma Charlotte watched her from the hallway. "You okay, baby?" Clara didn't look up. "Yeah. What's next?" She closed the laptop. "I think I need to start building Protocol 2.0. Charlotte chuckled. "Already planning the sequel?" Clara smiled. "This isn't over. They'll try to spin it, dilute it, make it look like a tech glitch or teenage rebellion." Charlotte nodded. "So, what do you do?" Clara stood up. "I make it undeniable." Elsewhere, at Skynova headquarters, chaos ruled. Jonathan Weiss, their head of legal, was on a conference call with international partners trying to delay audits. PR teams scrambled to counter the narrative, but it was too late. 3 global booking platforms, Skybook, Aeronet, and Wings Go, announced they would flag Skynova as ethics non-compliant until further notice. Even worse, 2 of them were already piloting the Skyscan system voluntarily. They had no intention of removing it. Because the truth was clear, the system worked. And it had just proven that one teenager with authority and integrity could bring an entire unethical airline to its knees without screaming, without threatening, without even raising her voice. Just a failsafe, and a girl brave enough to press it. The backlash hit faster than Clara expected. It started with one news headline: 15-year-old freezes airline over seat dispute. Overreach or justice? Then came the talking heads, cable networks, podcasts, comment threads flooded with, "Is she really a hero? Where were her parents? Why does a child have the power to shut down flights?" Clara watched from the living room couch, face blank. Her fingers clenched the throw pillow beside her as if it could absorb the noise. She wasn't afraid. She was tired. At Skynova's headquarters, the backlash was orchestrated. Their media team had gone into overdrive, hiring PR consultants to shape a new story. Clara was emotionally compromised. The gate lock was a reckless misuse of federal authority. Her mother's system was never intended to be in the hands of a minor. They pushed interviews with experts who questioned juvenile influence over aviation policy and quietly encouraged trolls to flood her socials with targeted harassment. It worked for about a day. Then something unexpected happened. A group of flight attendants, still anonymous, leaked a letter. It read, "We've watched Skynova ignore passenger abuse complaints for years. Clara didn't break the system. She proved it finally works." It went viral in 6 hours. By that night, Skynova's ethical score dipped below 40%, automatically revoking its pre-clearance access to 6 international airports. And that was just the beginning. Back home, Clara didn't gloat. She didn't post a victory thread. She logged off. Grandma Charlotte noticed. Too much? Clara nodded. They're not just attacking me. They're trying to erase her. My mom, everything she stood for. Charlotte sat beside her. Then make it louder. Don't defend. Lead. The next morning, Clara did just that. She posted a single line on skyethica.org, the platform she'd quietly co-developed with 3 other ethics coders. We're launching Passenger Ethics Charter 2.0. Either airlines protect passengers, especially vulnerable ones, or they lose access. Period. Attached was a white paper. It included a tiered accountability system, a verified score for real-time booking, flagging tools for minor and disabled passengers, a minimum ethics score requirement for FAA contracts. 24 hours later, 19 airlines signed. Skynova wasn't one of them. But Clara wasn't waiting. She had another announcement to make, this time from Geneva. Standing on stage at the Global Passenger Rights Conference, she spoke in front of ministers, airline executives, and advocacy groups. The skies don't belong to CEOs or gate agents with power trips. They belong to all of us. And no child should ever be told, you don't belong here. Not in 2025. Not ever again. The room rose in applause. A woman from the Dutch Aviation Board whispered to a colleague, "She's not a girl anymore. She's a force." At the same time, Clara's impact triggered industry shifts. FAA confirmed it would adopt Charter 2.0 into its compliance framework. 3 booking platforms required ethics scores to appear beside airline names. International airports began installing Clara terminals, kiosks where passengers could report unethical behavior in real time. Meanwhile, Skynova continued hemorrhaging support. Executives argued behind closed doors about whether to negotiate with the child. But the public wasn't having it. A trending tweet said it best. "She's 15 and she grounded you with a click. Maybe don't call her a child." At home, Clara stood by the bay window. She didn't feel like a hero, or a hacker, or a headline. She felt responsible. Her mom had always said, "Fix what you can, then teach others to fix what you can't." Now, she was doing both. Charlotte walked over, holding 2 mugs. "Hot cocoa," she said, "for generals who win wars." Clara smiled, took a sip, then looked at the night sky. "I'm not done yet." 72 hours after Clara's Geneva speech, the email started flooding in. Subject lines like, "Compliance request," "Tokyo Aviation Authority," "Urgent," "Charter 2.0 Adaptation Inquiry," "FAA," "Meeting Invitation," "Passenger Ethics Council." The room where Clara sat wasn't a war room. It was her grandmother's spare study, lined with old cookbooks and faded photos. Yet the air carried the weight of global infrastructure shifting. That morning, the FAA's Executive Council called an emergency press briefing. Their spokesperson, a steely woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense bun, stepped to the podium. After consultation with Skyscan authorities and the Bennett Foundation, we are adopting Passenger Ethics Charter 2.0 as a mandatory compliance protocol for all U.S. licensed carriers, effective immediately. A murmur spread through the room. She continued, "Charter 2.0 will be embedded in FAA licensing renewals, and ethics scores must remain above the federal threshold of 75% to retain route permissions." The shift was seismic. For the first time, a 15-year-old's ethical framework was shaping national aviation law. Back in Geneva, the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO. AO wasn't far behind. At a closed-door meeting, Clara sat across from aviation delegates from 21 countries. A British rep leaning forward said, "Clara, we've never seen this level of passenger advocacy gain traction so quickly." "Why now?" Clara didn't flinch. "Because people are done watching others get humiliated in silence. Because justice is no longer about lawsuits. It's about systems. And because a child doesn't need your permission to demand decency." Silence. Then, quiet, unanimous nod. By end of day, 17 countries signed preliminary approval of Charter 2.0. Meanwhile, Sky Nova's boardroom was chaos. The internal ethics dashboard had turned blood red. Ethics score, 31% booking partnerships, 3 suspended airport contracts, 5 revoked. CEO Rick Dalton slammed his fist on the table. "This is out of control. A teenager is rewriting our operational DNA," his PR chief muttered. "The teenager is just enforcing what her mother designed. We're the ones ignoring the system." Another exec leaned forward. "We have 2 choices. Sign the charter or bleed out slowly in public." But Rick wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. Outside the corporate world, the impact was visceral. At LAX, a group of disabled veterans cheered as new accessibility check-in modules were installed. Direct results of Clara's ADA clause in Charter 2.0. In Atlanta, a flight attendant testified anonymously to a watchdog panel. "I've seen my co-workers mock accents, ignore elderly passengers, and get away with it. Since Charter 2.0, 3 people on my line got flagged. They should have been years ago." In London, a single mom in a wheelchair posted a selfie with the caption, "First time I've ever boarded a plane without crying. Thank you, Clara." At home, Clara didn't bask in glory. She worked. For every headline, she double-checked back-end protocols. For every tweet praising her, she quietly emailed legal aid contacts to help other passengers file reports. Charlotte noticed the toll. "You're still a child," she said gently. Clara looked up, bags under her eyes. "That's the problem. If I don't act, no one takes us seriously. If I do, they say I'm too young." Charlotte sat beside her and handed her a worn notebook. "Then stop proving them wrong. Start leading like they can't catch up." The next turning point came a week later. The Federal Senate Aviation Subcommittee summoned Clara for a hearing titled "Passenger Dignity and Modern Aviation: The Bennett Reform Framework." She walked into the chamber wearing the same blazer as Geneva. Simple, confident. Senators asked tough questions. One said, "Miss Bennett, what qualifies you to dictate federal compliance protocols?" She replied calmly, "I don't dictate anything. I just made sure no one else can be silenced without accountability. Your systems allowed abuse to go unseen. I made it visible." The room was silent. Then Senator Martinez from Arizona leaned into the mic. "Miss Bennett, if my granddaughter ever flies alone, I hope the airline she boards remembers your name." By the end of that week, 4 massive shifts occurred. FAA passed the Bennett Compliance Act, permanently integrating Charter 2.0. 3 major U.S. airlines announced ethics officers on board each flight, a role created based on Clara's proposal. The Bennett score was displayed on all U.S. airline booking platforms, right beside flight prices. Sky Nova's CEO Rick Dalton resigned under pressure, issuing a statement that read, "We failed to recognize the ethical tide, and it cost us our future." In response, Clara didn't throw a press conference. She sent one tweet. "Passengers aren't cargo. They're humans. And now the skies reflect that." Her story reached more than the aviation world. A tech startup asked her to co-lead their ethical AI project. A European rail union wanted her guidance. Even public schools began teaching her story as part of civics classes, under the unit Modern Youth Leadership. One comment stood out online. She didn't just fix one flight. She rewired the whole runway. On a rainy Sunday evening, Clara stood by the window. Charlotte joined her, holding a small framed photo. It was Helena Bennett, arms folded, smiling beside an old plane prototype. "She'd be proud," Charlotte whispered. Clara didn't respond right away. Then she smiled faintly. She'd probably tell me to rest, and then double-check the algorithm. They laughed. As dusk fell, news anchors recapped the week with headlines like "Teenager Rewrites Federal Aviation Ethics." Charter 2.0, now standard across 42 nations. From passenger to pioneer, Clara Bennett's flight to change. But for Clara, it wasn't over. This wasn't a victory lap. It was only the first landing of many. Clara slipped onto the jet bridge, boarding pass in hand, and stepped into the first-class cabin of Flight 892, bound for New York. The familiar hum of overhead bins and soft chatter felt different today. Lighter, almost hopeful. She sank into seat 1A, the leather cool beneath her. The latch of the overhead bin clicked shut, and the soft glow of the reading light illuminated her notebook resting on the tray. She took a breath, exhaling slowly. 16 months ago, she'd been escorted to row 34, humiliated, isolated, stripped of dignity. Now, she was a quiet force, seated among people who greeted her with genuine respect. A flight attendant paused mid-aisle, offering a gentle nod. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Bennett," he said, before continuing his duties. Clara's lips curved in a small smile. The engines rumbled to life, and as the plane lifted off, she gazed out the window at the shrinking city below. Behind her, a teenage girl in the seat 1B tentatively tapped her tablet. Clara recognized the shy look, the same look she'd worn months ago before her work drew global attention. Catching Clara's eye, the girl offered a brief wave. Clara returned it with a warm nod. Clara opened her notebook and flipped to a clean page marked Protocol 3.2. She jotted down a few bullet points, expanding real-time ethics scoring to intercity trains, integrating passenger feedback into airport design, launching a multilingual ethics helpline. Her pen paused as she reconsidered the order. Even a small tweak could prevent confusion down the line. She wrote again, "Structure first, user interface next, data transparency always." The flight attendant returned with a glass of water, placing it gently on her tray. Clara nodded her thanks. No rush. She watched the cabin, the elderly woman next to her offering a sympathetic smile, the parents in row 1C gently quieting a restless toddler. None of them knew the full story, but they felt the change. The airlines they flew had freshly trained crews, new wheelchair access kiosks, and a culture of accountability. Clara's work had made those ripples. Just before they reached cruising altitude, the flight attendant announced, "If anyone needs assistance, anything at all, please press your call button. We're here to help." It felt like more than a routine line. It was a promise. On the in-flight screen, a small icon in the corner displayed the airline's ethics rating. 96%, up from a dismal 30 just months ago. Clara's heart swelled with pride. She remembered the early days when that red number haunted every dashboard, a glaring reminder of unspoken injustices. Now, it was green, almost flawless. She closed her eyes, quietly reflecting. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. You built something better. She remembered the first time she sat in a council hearing, powerless to convince seasoned officials. She remembered the backlash, pundits claiming a child had overstepped. She remembered typing the Charter 2.0 white paper, knowing it might cost her privacy and safety. And it had. But here she was, not celebrated as a trophy, but recognized as a changemaker. Clara's phone buzzed, a message from Geneva. Congratulations, Charter 3.0 module approved for pilot testing in 4 more countries. She glanced at the clock, 10:15 a.m. Pacific. The date would mark a year since the original Geneva vote. A full circle. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Clara slipped her notebook into her backpack. In the row behind, a retired teacher leaned forward. Miss Bennett, just wanted to say thank you. Her voice trembled slightly. Last year, my granddaughter was treated poorly. No one believed her. Now her fear has a voice. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you, she whispered. I'm glad it helped. The teacher nodded. You've given hope to so many. Clara gave a small nod, then returned to her window seat, heart steady. As the descent began, the captain announced, We'll be landing shortly. Thank you for flying with us today. Clara watched the suburban landscape roll out below. Rows of houses, winding highways, small parks dotted with children at play. She thought of those children, teenagers and younger, who might one day fly alone. She thought of adults still fighting for basic respect. She thought of her grandmother, quietly cheering her on from Berkeley. And she thought of her mother, whose vision had ignited all of this. The wheels touched down smoothly. In the aisle, passengers stirred to collect belongings. Clara stood, shouldered her backpack, and walked down the aisle. The flight attendant gave another nod. Hope to see you again soon, Miss Bennett. She continued toward the exit and into the terminal. Digital boards showed flight statuses alongside small ethics icons. Green, yellow, red, reminding everyone that accountability wasn't optional. She exited into the warm, filtered sunlight of the arrival hall, pausing to admire the passenger ethics portal display near baggage claim. An interactive kiosk where travelers could learn about their rights, rate their experience, and find resources. Clara paused there, reading a quote displayed on the screen. The skies belong to all who dare to dream of flight. She spun around, spotting a mother helping her toddler reach a button on the kiosk. The mother smiled at Clara and mouthed, Thank you. Clara returned the gesture, warmth flooding her chest. Moments later, Grandma Charlotte appeared, waving from the curb outside. Clara moved toward her, crossing paths with a family who paused, pointed, and mouthed, Thank you, Miss Bennett. Clara felt a soft glow. No pity, no condescension, just genuine respect. Charlotte helped Clara load her luggage into the car. As they drove away, the airport receded into the distance. Clara looked out the window at the highway ahead. Somewhere else, another flight prepared to take off. Another set of passengers would board, needing a system that cared. Back home, as dusk settled over Berkeley, Clara settled at her desk. The Protocol 3.0 outline was open, the first few lines already filled in. She paused, pen poised. She remembered the adolescent who had once been shoved from her seat, the frightened look in her own reflection as she walked row 34, the moment she tapped the failsafe. And now, she was that adolescent's hope returned, amplified to thousands. She tapped her pen to paper and wrote, Commitment. Protect the dignity of every traveler, everywhere. Begin with kindness. Build with transparency. She closed her notebook, satisfied for the moment. The moonlight filtered through the window, painting her workspace in soft silver. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, tweaks to the scoring algorithm, outreach to underrepresented communities, collaboration with disability advocacy groups. But tonight, the world seemed just a little more gentle, a little more fair. Clara switched off her lamp and climbed into bed. As she drifted to sleep, she dreamed of endless blue skies. This time, open to everyone. And that was all the closure she needed. How often do you fly? Whether you're a frequent traveler or only catch a plane a few times a year, tell us about any injustices you've seen in airports or on board. Even small incidents matter. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to learn from your experiences and build a better system together. If Clara's story inspired you, please like this video and share it so more passengers know their rights.